Right, good afternoon Oslo. It's happy to be here and congratulations with the 10-year anniversary. Almost as long as we've been waiting for FSD to become reality. Now, let me start with a little story. 2014, I bought my first Tesla, it's P85D, with the promise of it can drive itself someday. And it was still all hardware, autopilot 1. We had to wait for it. It came out in the US on the highway. It was really great. But then it came to Europe finally, 2016, something like that. And the first time I took it out, I was really scared. Like, oh, what do I need to do? Does this actually go? I was afraid to let go of the steering wheel. But soon we became accustomed to it. And about 2-3 weeks after that, I took a trip from Belgium, where I live, to Amsterdam, which was a 2-hour trip, mostly highway. Took my car to the highway, turned on autopilot, didn't touch my steering wheel for 2 hours until I had to leave the highway again. It worked with autopilot 1 at that point. Now fast forward to June 2019, and the UNECE created regulations, the R79 regulation that limited autopilot to a great extent. And from that point on, this is kind of how we were feeling. Right? Everybody wanted autopilot. Government said, no, you can't have it. Right? So, what is actually the UNECE? UNECE stands for the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. Important to know, and I get a lot of questions about that on my channel or when people talk to me, it's a UN regulation, it's not the EU regulation. So if it's UN, then why is the US allowing FSD? Now, to know or to understand it, I have to take you through what the UNECE actually is and how it works. So bear with me on this one. So, first of all, you have the UNECE. UNECE is a general overarching commission for Europe and other countries as well. I will show you in just a bit. Now, they have a lot of working parties that involve specific countries. So the ones that we are interested in is working party number 1, which is for general safety, and the working party 29, which talks about regulations for, amongst other things, autonomous driving. Now this working party has some members to it. So it's a document that members have to sign, and the reason why the US is allowed to have FSD on the road is they did not sign into this one. So they did not agree on implementing the same regulations as everyone else is doing. Now if you go further, so this is the big working party. They are the final people to say, okay, this is what we apply and this is what we sign into. Underneath you have the GRSG for passive safety, you have one for the brakes and the running gear, you have the one for autonomous and connected cars, you have some for pollution and energy, you have some even for noise and tires, so the pedestrian noise warning, the warning system that we have in the new cars, that's one of those work groups underneath the working party. And then even one for light and signaling. GRVA is the one that we are interested in, and that is again split up into task forces about automatic steering, about braking, about just plain certification, cybersecurity, data storage systems, all of that. These are the ones that we are interested in, right? So if we go forward, these are the ones that we need to keep an eye on. So automatic steering, of course, autopilot, autonomous driving, if we go further, the new DCAS regulations, and of course the functional requirements, they are the task forces that determine how we can use autopilot. Now again, 68 countries are signed into the WP29. As I mentioned, this is UN, not EU, so Norway is here, UK is here, Switzerland is also there, even South Africa and New Zealand are part of this WP29. So they all signed into the agreement that they will implement all the same regulations, basically. Now, before I dive into the details about the regulations, there's one more thing that I need to share with you, is the SAE levels. When we talk about regulations, we are talking about usually level 2, level 3, level 4 autonomous driving. What does that mean? Well, those are these levels. And the first 3 levels, you can see here, and the top part says you are driving. You are in control of the car, and that is the most important part for the entire classification. Level 0, just blind spot warning, lane departure warning, it's just warnings, it's nothing active. Level 1, it's one system that's active. Level 2 is basically where autopilot is at the moment. Level 3 will be autonomous driving, but in certain conditions. I'll come back to that later as well. Level 4 means autonomous driving in almost any circumstance. And level 5 is you don't need a steering wheel anymore. Now, will we ever get to level 5? I don't know, because I think there will always be situations like in Kazakhstan on those roads where sometimes the road is half washed away. Does FSD, can it cope with that? That's a good question. Does it need to be able to cope with that? That's another question. So level 4 is our target for, let's call it the civilized world, the concrete world that we are living in. This is where FSD is at. Even in the US, it's a very, very good level 2 system, but it's still a level 2 system, and you as a driver are always responsible for the car. Even with the new features where you can drive hands off, it has camera driver monitoring. It's still level 2. As soon as you're not paying attention, the car will give you strikes in case of Tesla, but legally it's not allowed to continue anymore. So which regulations do we need to watch? So if you have a lot of time and a lot of sleepless nights, I can recommend going through documents from the UNECE. The first one we need to watch is the R79, which is for level 2 driving. So summon, which we have in Europe, but in a very limited version. Lane keeping is in there, adaptive cruise control is in there, so the basic autopilot stuff. The next one, level 3, auto lane keeping system, ALKS, is for autonomous driving. So that's level 3. And then the R171 is the one that we are currently most passionate about, is the one for the driver control assistance system, the DCAS, which is the regulation that might bring FSD to Europe. So that's the one that we need to watch. So currently it is approved for driver initiated and driver confirmed maneuvers, but not for system initiated, which is necessary to be on par with what is in the US. If we go further, important to note is of course that cars itself do not fall within one of these categories, its functions. So a car can have a level 3 function, but can also have a level 2 function. The different regulations take place or they apply when a car is executing a certain function. So if a car is just, your Tesla has autopilot, which is level 2, but if you're just using cruise control on the old ones, you can't do it anymore in the new ones, but if you're just using cruise control, for example, then your car is executing a level 1 function. So it's not the car that needs to be certified, it's actually the functionality that needs to be certified. So a car can have both level 2 and level 3 capabilities. Now, to give you some insight into how idiotic some of these regulations are, this is an example that is straight, I drew the car thing there, but this is an example straight from the regulations. They actually specify a maximum lateral G acceleration that you can have when turning into a bend. That means that, and this is translated into G's as roughly 0.3 G's that you can do. It's not a lot. it wants you to drive like an old grandma, basically, because they think that is the safest way to drive. Now this has two downsides. One, the speed limits in a certain place that the car can read are not always correct for that bend. And two, if the car doesn't recognize the bend up front, as the Tesla car has been doing for quite a while, it has gotten better lately with latest versions. But if you go too fast in a bend, the car can legally not go faster into that bend or turn more sharply into that bend to keep you on the road, and it is forced to drive you into the oncoming traffic. That's regulations for it. Now the problem is on two sides. It's also Tesla's problem. They need to recognize the bend, of course, up front and slow down to an appropriate speed to adhere to these regulations, and that's the part that has been improved quite a bit. Another one that we all face and we all have experience with, I guess, is driver-initiated lane changes. So, per regulations, as soon as you start your blinker, the car cannot move for the first second. It's not allowed. Then, between the third and the fifth second, it needs to cross the lane marker with the front wheels, and then it has 5 seconds to complete the maneuver. Tesla and other car companies have been trying to extend that period, but the government or the UNECE said no, it's too dangerous. The reason why they do this is say, okay, you announce your intention before you start the maneuver. But having this much of a gap or the time gap, is just not realistic in busy traffic. Now, what does that mean? This formula is literally from the UNECE regulations. They try to implement, or they try to describe the real world into mathematical equations. That's where things go wrong and things go very slow. So I made an example. So you're driving at 120 kilometers an hour. You want to overtake the car in front of you. A car is coming from behind at 130 kilometers an hour. How big of a gap do you need between the cars? And if you calculate everything, then you come to 35 or almost 36 meters behind the car that you need a clear gap before the car can even start moving into that gap. You can imagine that on busy days, this is never going to work. So that's why autopilot is not so great, or at least the auto lane change is not so great in Europe. What is currently under discussion? So the DCAS regulations, the system initiated maneuvers, so we have driver confirmed maneuvers. The system, the way we have autopilot right now, the system suggests something, the driver needs to confirm that. That is something that has already been approved in February or March, I believe, yes, March. Now they are talking about system-initiated maneuvers where the car can actually decide to do the lane change. In that case, that gap is not such a big issue anymore because the car can determine the right gap at that time. Now you have to initiate it and hope that the gap that you have is just big enough. Hands-free driving on divided highways is also part of the current talks, so that's one of the big ones. If we can have that, highway driving will be a lot more relaxed, and it will just be camera monitoring, so hands-off, eyes-on driving on highways. They basically don't say highways, but they define it as roads with a divider in the middle where there is no access for pedestrians or cyclists. So to minimize the variables, I just call it highways, because basically that's it. I also had some discussions with Roland Patel. He's the ex-vice president for public policy. Unfortunately, he no longer works at Tesla at this point, but I had some talks with him about FSD and will it be coming to our countries, yes or no, and he was not too optimistic earlier this year, because to comply with all the specific regulations, Tesla would have to change their software and add a lot of UNECE flags. to it and say, okay, if you're in the UNECE, you can do this, but you cannot do that, and so on and so on. What Tesla actually wants is an AI system that works everywhere. And here they would have to combine it with hard-coded things, which is not something they really want to do. Now, that does not mean that they won't do something like this, but it's more unlikely. He could unfortunately not comment on any current development in that direction. Of course, for DCS, hands-free driving, we need camera monitoring. A lot of cars, everything up to autopilot 2.5 even, does not have an interior camera. So what happens when these regulations are approved? Tesla brings LSD to Europe and you don't have the interior camera. One of two options: either you won't get it and you will fall back to the other regulations there. That's one of the options, which I hope won't happen. The other one is that Tesla will do a retrofit of the interior camera. Will be a costly thing for them to do, but we all paid good money for LSD many years ago, so it would be the right thing to do. Unfortunately, this talk is now happening 2 days before the next GRVA meeting, where they will talk about these new topics. And before that, last week, the ADAS, so the what is it again? The driver assistance system, or automatic driver assistance system, something like that. The task force on that completed their talks, and they had some brand new developments that took everybody by surprise, because now the DCAS was talking about city driving. Now they are saying, well, actually we only want it on highways. And you know, we were talking about that eyes-on, hands-on driving. Yeah, we don't want that either. So it's a proposal. Nothing has been decided yet. It's a proposal they are putting forward for the meeting next week. There will be a lot of discussions, but the idea is that some parties are not convinced that the system is there. Mainly, there are two concerns that they have. One is the system is not good enough, and then it will cause accidents. The other one is the system is too good, and people start relying on it too much and thinking it's an autonomous car, while it is, remember, still level 2, because you are always in control of the car and responsible for it. So yeah, safe to say, Tesla definitely not happy with this decision. So there will be a lot of talks about that and a lot of discussions. Let's talk about S. Never thought I would say that on stage, but S stands for actually Smart Summon, which is the new summon feature that came out in the US a couple of weeks ago, and is really awesome. Right now, it can actually detect what kind of road it is on. It's still meant for parking lots and only allowed on parking lots, but some of the parking lots actually have roundabouts and that kind of stuff. So I saw a video of a guy that was standing like on the wrong side of the roundabout. The car was coming from here, and the car knew it had to drive all the way around instead of just turning into the traffic. So it is really good, but is it allowed? Short answer, yes. Long answer, kind of. Again, image that's coming from the regulations. You need to have a continuous press, which is in the US now too, I believe. But also you cannot be further away than 6 meters from the car. With Tesla cars, I have noticed you have to be within the range of the key fob, which is close to like 1.5 meters, and that's about it. And often when you try it, the camera system says, well, you're in the way, I will not move. Theoretically, it can go up to 6 meters in distance. The way that Tesla is implemented, and this is on Tesla, it's not that usable in the US. In Europe. In the US, it's perfectly usable. You can summon the car from 100 meters away while it's raining, and you don't have to get wet because the car is coming to you. Or you're standing in a puddle, you don't have to get wet with your feet to get in, you can summon the car out. We can do the same thing, but just basically from a parking space, back out of it, back into it, and just drive a little bit to the side with Smart Summon, but that's about it. I think it's close to a month ago, Tesla AI, not Elon Musk this time, posted a timeline for FSD. The bottom part is important for us. FSD in Europe Q1 2025, depending on regulatory approval, which has always been the extra asterisk on any timelines there. The question is that realistic? Knowing what we know now and how the UNECE works, September 2024, GRVA meeting needs to finalize and agree 100% on what they want to put forward on the DCAS regulations. It was roughly a 50% chance before the new developments that came out last week, so now it's less than 50% chance that it will actually be concluded at the GRVA. But let's remain positive. If that happens, it needs to go to the WP29 meeting, and that one is in November. Now, usually they want the document to be submitted way in advance so they can read it, they can prepare questions and all that kind of stuff. So, chances of it going to the November meeting are very slim to kind of non-existent. So, the WP29, they meet 3 times a year. That's November, March, and June. So the next one is March. In the meantime, GRVA has more time to finalize the DCAS regulations or proposal. And once it goes to WP29, if the GRVA agrees on everything, then basically it's just a formality. They might have a couple of questions, but they trust the different task forces to do their thing. So if the GRVA says yes, most likely WP29 also says yes. But after the approval at the WP29, it takes about 6 months before it goes into effect. So the DCAS regulations that were approved in February went into effect in September. So as of now, it is theoretically possible to have that DCAS system with hands-on driving. So September 25 is more of a realistic timeline to get DCAS, and hopefully with the hands-off, eyes-on system, and hopefully not just on highways. But let's address a few elephants in the room then. So Mercedes, 2021 already, first one approved for level 3, UN regulation 157, remember the ALKS regulation, they were approved. However, that regulation was approved generally on UNECE level, but because it's nowhere allowed to take out your cell phone and start texting while driving, regulations had to be adjusted, because now you can. If you have a Mercedes, if you drive in Germany, or the UK by now, you can have level 3 driving in traffic, 60 kilometers an hour maximum speed, and you can take out your laptop and stop working. It's legal to do that. But only in Germany, because they are the only ones that adjusted their regulations. So that's very limited. The regulations have in the meantime been upgraded to allow it up until 130 kilometers an hour, but Mercedes has not implemented up to that speed. Now also, only Germany, it's one of the constraints. The other constraints are only in good weather, so it can't rain. There cannot be tunnels. You're driving in the same lane, so there's no auto lane changes on that. There's no emergency vehicles. There's no roadworks. There's no police that is guiding traffic, so it's very limited, and it's more like a bragging right, like, hey, we are the first to have level 3, but it is very limited. Now, if you're stuck in a traffic jam on the German Autobahn, it's wonderful. BMW, same thing. They now have been approved. So this is an article from June 2024. The BMW 7 Series with their highway assistant is also approved. Level 3, again, 3 countries. Germany, UK, and Spain. So those are the 3 countries where it is allowed. But also If you look at the bottom here, it's oh no, this one is even exclusive. It's the Mercedes in Spain as well. This one is exclusively in Germany, even. So no other countries. If you're a German person, wonderful. If you live in Croatia or anybody else, not much use you have on that. Another one, Ford Blue Cruise has hands-off driving for most countries in Europe. So they do have the hands-off, eyes-on principle. So how can that be if the DCS regulation has not been approved? Well, they have gone through a very lengthy and rigorous certification process. Could Tesla do the same thing? Sure. Will Tesla do the same thing? Probably not, because they're still looking for that general solution. They are not investing into a sidetrack. They want to stay on the main branch, on the main road, to get autonomous driving for everyone. But in theory, they could apply for it. It takes many months and many tests that need to be done. But in theory, they could actually do it. So the big question, should we hate the UNECE? As Tesla drivers, we tend to be very vocal about it, especially me, about these regulations and the lack of progress. But in essence, the UNECE at its core has a very good purpose. They want to keep the roads safe, both for us as drivers and other road users. They also talk about the homologation process. If the UNECE did not put anything into one process, then I might not be able to drive my car here, because blinkers in Belgium need to be orange, and in Norway you like them pink, for example. Or I need a very loud pedestrian warning system, and that warning system is too loud for any other country, for example. That would be very difficult. So we are a nation, a community of small countries, and it would be very difficult because each country has different road markings, different road signs, different laws, different speeds. It would be very difficult to have something that is uniform and is allowed in every single country. So they have good purpose in essence, but they just take way too long. As I've shown you the structure, it's just way too complex to move along quickly. So yes and no. I think I see their point. I know why they are doing it, why they are moving so slow, but on the other hand, 5-6 years is too slow to move on. So what can we do about it? As owners, if you really want autopilot, if you really want to have your car drive you to work instead of you driving the car to work, then be vocal about it. Talk to your Minister of Transport, use the local Tesla owner club that you are at. They can get in touch with the government and let them know that we want this. The more that we have, the more pressure that we can put on the regulators. And this is actually the time. There was a time where Tesla actually asked me to back down a little bit with the pressure on the regulators. Usually I was kind of surprised to learn about that, but they actually watched my videos about the progress or the lack of progress. And in the earlier videos I was picking on some countries specifically once in a while, and they were not happy with that. So actually I got asked to not do that anymore. But yeah, we need to put pressure on them. There is no way to get like a common, how do you say it in English, like a common thing to get the signatures all out. Yes, it is possible, but that has to go through the European Council, and then we have to have at least 1 million signatures with minimum quota for each country. So the bigger the country, the more signatures you need per country. So it's almost impossible to get that going. I started that once, but that was just not working. But be vocal about it, talk to the government, make sure that they support the cause. So that was it for me. So let's connect if you want. I have a lot more videos with more details, a lot more details on my YouTube channel. If you're not subscribed, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Follow me on Twitter. Yes, Twitter, on X. And for now, we still have, let's see, we still have a few minutes left, I think. So I'm happy to take any questions if there are any questions about FSD or anything else in general. Yeah, sure.
I remember talking of that committee doing all this.
UNECE.
Yeah. What are they coming from, these people doing these regulations? Are there people from like big car companies or?
Yeah, good question. The people that are involved in the talks are the people that are coming from the car companies. So you have Avere, for example, which is a big conglomerate of all the different car manufacturers. They will talk to the UNECE. The people in the UNECE or in the GRVA are government people, which is one of the issues. They are not that technical in essence, but it's also somewhat a mystery of who is in there, because I've been searching for years. There is not a list that you can find like who is exactly in this specific meeting or in the specific GRVA group. I know a few people because they are my sources as well, but in total they are under heavy NDAs also. So it's very difficult to know who exactly is in these talks, but mostly they are not from any technical area. Any other questions? Yeah, sure.
I know it sounds a little conspiracy, but it looks like the regulations are working kind of against Tesla and for the other companies which are slower to implement the self-driving.
No. It used to be like that several years ago. Now the German car makers are just pushing just as hard as Tesla to get this through. Everybody from the auto industry is pushing forward to get this going because they are all ready. Not everybody is at the same level as Tesla. That you see, Mercedes goes for level 3, BMW goes for level 3. BMW also has the mirror glancing in different countries as a driver confirmation, so that's a eyes on, hands off system also, that they can say, okay, if you glance in the mirror, we have to use the turn signal or wiggle the wheel. They can do it like that, so everybody's catching up to Tesla. So that period is kind of gone. There is no real lobby against Tesla anymore. It's just that the governments, the problem with governments is they care about road safety, but they expect perfection from an autonomous system, while they still allow every day that people kill other people. And that's one of my main pet peeves to talk about online as well. As soon as the system can save one additional life, it should be allowed to happen. But perfection, no, it will not. It cannot exist. There will always be issues. There will always be things that cannot be trained for. The exception, the corner cases. So for me, yeah, it's definitely, it should already be active because it is so good, especially if you look at the US. Question over there.
I have 2 questions.
Sure.
First, road marks in Norway are very poor or bad, even on highways. Does that impact FSD regulation in Norway? And the second question is that my Tesla Model X 2017 model upgraded to MCU2 with FSD. I think it's 2.5. Is that needed any upgrade from my side? You mentioned that you hope that Tesla will do it, but I've already upgraded from MCU1 to MCU2 for the visual thing.
Yeah.
Can you say something more about that?
Sure, so first, road markings, no, that will not be an issue, because if you look at what's in the US, we still need road markings to activate it, but that's because we have an old software stack. In the US, it's not a problem to drive anywhere with FSD, so That's not going to be an issue once that same software can come to Europe. As for upgrading your car, if you have bought FSD, you probably will have been upgraded to the hardware 3 computers, and that will be enough for what we will currently see in FSD. So what's currently in the US is running on hardware 3. My car is a PLED, but it's still the first generation PLED, so that means that I still have hardware 3 as well. It will get FSD the way we have it currently in the US. We also need to keep in mind that there's a big difference between Tesla FSD and true FSD. Right? Tesla FSD is currently level 2. Tesla does not take any responsibility for the system. As soon as we go to level 3 and beyond, you can sleep in the back of the car. That is what true FSD is. I can summon the car, I can ask my car to pick up my mother who lives 50 kilometers away for some kind of birthday party. I don't have to drive there and pick her up and bring her back. I can send the car, she can get in the back or the front seat, and she can be taken to me. That is what true FSD is going to be. That's what the robo-taxi promise is all about. So, to be honest, Tesla FSD hardware 3, I think up to what we see currently, no issues. I don't know what's coming next. Maybe that requires more processing, but right now they are developing everything for hardware 4 and then porting into hardware 3. So hardware 4 is finally surpassing hardware 3 at this point. There is already talk about hardware 5. Don't know what that means. But I do believe personally that with the current set of hardware, we will never reach true FSD. It will need, especially from a regulatory standpoint, it will need additional sensors, additional types of sensors to have redundancy. Right now, the only redundancy that we have is for the front cameras, but for the side cameras, if one is down, it will not do a lane change anymore. I tested that. Just tape off the camera, or on a foggy morning, it just doesn't want to do the lane changes. So it needs an alternative for that in cold climates or when it's dirty, fogged up, whatever. Any other? Any other questions?
Could you tell us a bit about your YouTube channel and how do you combine that with your regular work?
Difficult. So I have a full-time job as an IT manager at the company, which takes a lot of overtime as well often, and that I have to combine with my YouTube channel. So it's not always easy. That's also why I haven't always been consistent in my videos. Sometimes it's relatively easy to do, like for example the autopilot testing that I've done before. Those videos, they usually take about half a day. I know my route that I want to test, I know the test points, and sometimes it's like testing 5-6 times the same thing to get the proper result. That there's not going to car from the other side that the car is braking on. If the car is doing something weird, retesting it, saying that it is consistent, yes or no. So that's about 4 hours work with video editing included. When we talk about videos for the regulations, I have to go through the entire document. I never use ChatGPT for reading the document, because the wording in the document is actually crucial to interpret it. And that takes usually about a day and a half. So yeah, that's several nights spread out, and then I have to record it, I have to edit it. Luckily I now have some good software that records and edits kind of in one. But yeah, it takes a lot of time. It's a very time-consuming hobby.
Just a follow-up question. One of the most viewed video you have is called Brown on
Oh, Norway. Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about the episode?
Yeah, sure. So it all started with buying the PLED, and of course, if you have a machine like that, you want to test it. I upgraded my car with the carbon ceramic brakes to unlock the top speed. Did that on the Autobahn, of course, there is a lot. Which is very hard to do actually, because at very high speeds, the car becomes unstable quite quickly if you get some jumps in the road, so it's very dangerous. I would not recommend doing that. I'm just a certified nutcase. But also, I wanted to see how it actually performed on the track. So I reached out to Misha Kennedy, who is another famous YouTuber who drives everybody's car on the Nürburgring. He has done like 10,000 laps, he knows everything inside out. I was like, here's my car, please take me on a trip around the Nürburgring. And he did things with my car that I thought were just plain impossible to do. Corners that we were going through at speeds that I was thinking we should be somewhere behind that barrier right now, and the car was actually performing great. So I was like, awesome, I can do that too. But of course, I know myself, I'm quite competitive, but on the other hand, I'm also careful. It's my daily driver. First of all, you're not insured on the Nürburgring. That's also an important one to remember if you ever go there. And it's not only about your driving, somebody can crash into your car as well. So you have to keep that in mind. But when I went there back with my brother a few months after that, last year, and we did a couple of good laps, no problem. And of course, you get more and more confident. And then we come to the high-speed section, and I just gave it a little bit more. Came across the bump, car turned light, had to correct before turning in, of course. And then I was on the brakes while I was going into a corner that is known for being bent in the wrong direction. If you're on the brake or even just letting go of the accelerator, the car is just, the back is just stepping out at that point. So when that happened, the only thing I said was, oh shit. And then it was full lock control. I had to keep the car as much as possible on the tarmac. As long as I was spinning, I was losing speed. Some people commented like, yeah, you did nothing and you just were a passenger along for the ride. I actually was very conscious about what I was doing because I wanted to lose as much speed as possible. I had seen a lot of other accidents where they started counter steering, and as soon as the car got grip, it just shoots out in that direction. But whether or not it was the right thing to do, whether or not I was along for the passenger, it was actually the only right thing that I could have done, because every other outcome would have been worse, because eventually I pulled the car straight like this far from the barrier at that point, and we had to limp home. The car slid onto the grass, and because of that, grass came in between the wheel and the tire. So that meant that the tire was leaking air at that point. That was kilometer 7 of the track. The track is 21 kilometers, so we had 14 kilometers to go to get off the track and not have to be towed off the track, because one, that's expensive. Second point, they tow you to a city nearby, and then it's you're on your own at that point. So luckily, I knew Misha, and we got off the track. I drove to Misha's place, asked him if he could help. He did not have the equipment to change the tire. He did fill it up to like 4.5 bars, something like that. Told me to drive to the other side of the Nürburgring, where they have Mountain racing, and it's a Porsche center. So imagine Porsche guys, the ice guys, the heavy machines, the loud exhausts, and then you come there with your electric car, like, can you help me please? But they did. I didn't have to pay anything even. So they just pulled off the tire. I thought the rim might have been bent, but everything was okay, basically. And I even took the car. I had to go in for service the day after anyway. So I asked the guys from Tesla, okay, please check everything because this happened. And the car was just perfectly fine. There was no risk of flipping the car. It was very stable on the ground. I was never scared that that would happen. I was mostly scared for hitting the barrier with the front or the back of the car. But it was quite an adventure. I still have to go back. Maybe next week, if the weather is fine, I'm going back there to get back on the proverbial horse.
Nice. I guess your pulse was high. Any more questions?
There was one more question, but person left.
I think it's important back to having the regulations to get in favor of letting free the FSD. One important thing to mention, if any of us are going and trying to influence politics, is the statistics which Tesla has been making for many years now, showing how many accidents the general cars in US have, how many miles each accident, and it's even lower for a manual driven Tesla because of all the warnings inside, and it's even lower when you're driving on autopilot, and it's like 1 to 10 safer.
Yeah.
So I mean that should be enough for the stakeholders to say we should go for this because that will save lives and accidents.
Yes and no. What the regulators, I don't know, like for the past half year, but up until last year, they were actually saying we don't really care about US data because the road system in the US is vastly different. Traffic lights are in different places. The roads are much wider than what we have here. So Tesla has taken them on many demo drives. I know there's a few people around that were working for Tesla, first of all, you have the test operators that have the FSD version, of course, but also the ones that are in talks with the regulators. They can enable FSD on their cars, and they have been taking the politicians around for a drive. So the movement is going to convince them, but data from the US is not just accepted as the full truth at this point. I can understand why on the one hand, but on the other hand, it's about the principle. Right? It's a principle that in that situation it's already a lot safer. Why not try it? And that's a bit of the problem that we have in Europe and other UNECE countries is the trying part. And in the US it's we try it, if we fail we adjust. And Europe is we need everything regulated to the and up to the minute details, and then we will allow it. It's a different approach, I think. Okay. Any more? Yeah, one there. The like final one.
He wondered about the responsibility of Tesla for the ones like you have about FSD several times.
Yeah.
Do they have any heuristic responsibility, or are they small? What do you think?
Good question. Good question. Let me see, show of hands. Who has bought FSD? Twice? Who has bought it more than once? Thank you for sponsoring Tesla. Yeah, I'm with you guys. I have it 2 times as well. I think Tesla should make it transferable for any of us until it becomes a reality. They are making it transferable, or they have made it transferable a few times already at the end of the quarter, like a new incentive kind of thing. But Elon in the last meeting said last time, no more. I think we should continue to push for that, especially in Europe. And again, Tesla Owners Club can help with that as well, to put some more weight behind that. Do they have any legal responsibility to that? To be honest, I don't think so. Because every time you bought it on the page, there was always an asterisk pending regulatory approval. As long as an approval is not, I think it was pending software validation and regulatory approval. So we haven't validated the software yet, or it's not legally allowed. So Tesla has covered their asses there, I'm afraid, and I don't think we can do any legal actions. But I think we can still push. FSD is costing them nothing at this point. It's just software. It's not additional hardware that needs to be installed. So I would continue to push for having the FSD transferable for all of us that have bought it in Europe. Okay. Thank you very much.
Steven is from Belgium, and as we all know, Norwegian chocolate is much better. We have given some real candy tonight.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, thank you very much.
Purpose.
All right.
Big hand for Steven, and thanks for coming tomorrow.
Thank you. Happy to be here.